Hello and welcome to the second annual AWP Exchange brought to you by O3 Solutions. Today's summit will focus primarily on the role of the contractor in the AWP process. So, for those of you I haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Andrew Foy and I'll be your MC for today. I'm O3's Vice President of AWP and Construction. Before joining O3, I spent 10 years executing capital projects on the contractor side and then started a full-time dedicated AWP champion role in 2015, working for various owner organizations throughout the US and Canada. And introducing your support team for today's event, these are some of the faces and names you may already know. They'll be here today to answer any questions you may have, help with logistics, and facilitate our exciting sessions. At any time, you can reach out directly to either of them for help. You can also chat with them directly through the GoToWebinar chat window. So welcome, Tori and Mandy. And now for today's agenda. Sorry, folks, bear with me just as I step this through to the next slide. There we go. So our primary purpose for these summits is to assist in AWP implementation by educating contractors and owners on methods for deployment and providing feedback and lessons learned from a number of completed AWP projects. We're going to start today by having a framing conversation with some background on O3 before we meet our three peer stories brought to you by our guest speakers, Michelle, Linda, and Zachary. Then, after a short break, we'll change pace and we'll talk about AWP technology and some of the implementation tips and support for contractors who are early in their AWP journey. We'll then close out with key takeaways and, time permitting, give you a chance to ask questions about any of our sessions today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tori for a brief safety moment.
Thank you, Andrew. So first, let's take a quick look at the importance of communication, especially on a job site. These are some simple and common sense steps that everyone should keep in mind. First, begin with a positive outlook. As they say, attitude is everything. Second, create an environment to be heard. Listening is just as important as communicating. Third, set the stage for the conversation. Fourth, be tactful and concise. Try not to overcomplicate what you're saying and just stick to the facts. Fifth, avoid abrupt, offensive, or accusatory statements. And then sixth, again, be sure to listen. Seventh, agree where you can. It's important to always find common ground. And lastly, encourage standards and advocate for success. And you can find these helpful tips and more at this source link. It's important to remember that communication with employees can help prevent accidents and injury on the job. All right, now let's take a quick look at some housekeeping items. So throughout today's presentations, you can submit questions through Slido, or you can chat with any of the event hosts directly in GoToWebinar. All of today's presentations and recordings will be available to all registered attendees soon after today's event. You can follow along on social media using our hashtag AWPExchange as we post throughout the event on each of our platforms. So with that, we're going to do a quick practice with Slido because we're going to do that with Q&A sessions and our polls. Or so you can scan this QR code, or you can visit slido.com and enter the code hashtag AWPExchange. So let's start now with our quick practice just to get you warmed up. So scan this QR code, or again, you can visit slido.com and enter hashtag AWPExchange. And we're just going to ask you to enter where you're joining us from today. It can be your town, your city, your country, your state, wherever it is. I'll give everyone a few seconds to add your answers. Oh. All right, it's looking like we're getting a lot of variety here. but Houston seems to be winning out. And then Philadelphia, India, that's good. Several other countries, Australia, Germany, Canada. All right, so now that everybody's had a few seconds to practice that, I will turn it back over to Andrew to continue today's conversation.
Thank you very much, Tori, and great to see a great range of people joining us from all over the world today, especially from the person who took the time to say that Houston is a furnace. Hope you guys are doing well coping with the heat over there. Our first presentation today is going to be a little bit of background about O3. So we are going to get started, and to join us, I'd like to introduce and welcome Josh Gervin, the CEO of O3 Solutions. Josh, welcome, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. So starting for today, I just wanted to frame up a little bit of the conversation on who O3 is for those who are not familiar with us. O3 is a modern web-based software application that's built specifically around advanced work packaging and agile best practices. So we were purpose-built around AWP, not a solution that is attempting to move to AWP after the fact. A little bit about our client base. It's roughly 50-50 split between owners and EPCs, with a small but growing contractor base. So that's part of what we're talking about today. We got a lot of more clients who are coming in from the contractor space. So that's part of what we want to, why we're hosting on an event on contractors. A little bit about O3 by the numbers. Deployed on over 500 projects, over 10,000 users in the tool, with owners and contractors and EPC firms. As a software solution, it is a comprehensive platform that goes across the entire project lifecycle, so AWP support from front-end planning all the way through startup and commissioning. Why O3 is better than some of the solutions in the space? There is a number of solutions that we call the legacy providers. These are tools that were made 20 years ago that are built on older technology. They're thick clients and on-premise solutions. As a modern web-based application, O3 has the ability to connect with other applications and be a collaboration environment that these tools simply can't do because they're built on older technologies. And there's some other folks out there who weren't built around AWP, but then they see AWP as being an area where the market is moving, and so they slap an AWP sticker on their solution. What makes O3 different is that we were built with the first solution to recognize that a complete project solution of AWP across that project lifecycle is where the market's going, and the first ones to build that out. And then the last is there are some startups and vaporware providers that are emerging that have seen the success that O3 has had in this, and that's another area where, just as a proven technology that's actually been deployed across the globe, O3 has an advantage. Some of the things that set us apart: we are a single modern platform, so it's cloud-based, it's easy to configure and set up. It supports work packaging and true work package management. So it's not just about scoping those packages and then printing something out to execute in the field. It's about actually managing that package through a workflow, whether that's an installation work package or an engineering work package or a startup package. Those packages can be managed through an actual workflow with configurable statuses and constraint management, true constraint management through that. So it's not about just scoping a package. You actually need to be able to manage that through a workflow to be able to fully take advantage of the value of AWP. The tool is highly scalable. We're on some of the largest projects in the world, $50 or $60 billion type TIC projects, down to projects that are under $1 million in TIC, where we're managing portfolios of projects, particularly at existing operating assets. So really scalable from the largest projects down to the smallest. And then what really sets O3 apart is that we ourselves are an agile software development shop. So we do a new production release of the software every 2 weeks. So you don't get a new release every 1 or 2 years like legacy providers. You get a new production release every 2 weeks. And so we're constantly improving the solution and constantly getting feedback from our users in the field and incorporating that to make the solution better as quickly as we can. When we talk about our solution, this is the overall platform. Again, this is a platform that goes across the entire project lifecycle. So there are 4 main modules or solutions on the AWP side. We start with on-plan for front-end planning, typically an owner using that to set up the project for AWP success. On Design is our AWP solution built specifically for engineering. And it's important to note that this isn't just engineering work packages. This goes beyond that. This is around vendor work packages and design work packages and actually providing value directly to engineering through AWP. On Build is where you get into the workplace planning side. So that's where you're doing construction work package management, installation work package management, test work packages. We also offer scaffold work packages in the solution. And then finally on Start, where you're focused on commissioning and startup. Underneath that, we have our On Target solution, which is our Agile project management and task management. So that's where you can manage all the tasks and activities for the project in a collaborative environment. So this is about removing all those spreadsheets and shared spreadsheets and action trackers and emails that we try to use to manage the tasks on a project and getting that into a collaborative environment. The key piece there is that this isn't a solution that we developed by buying a bunch of different softwares and trying to tape those together. This is a platform that was built from the ground up to be a solution across the entire project lifecycle. So it's one single data approach. It's one single modern user interface. It's not a kludge together, a Frankenstein's monster of multiple solutions. It was designed specifically to be a complete AWP solution across the entire project lifecycle. If you want to learn a little bit more about O3, you can visit our website. We have lots of case studies, lots of webinars and blogs and vlogs and various information that you can access. So you can go to o3.solutions and access any of that information. We encourage you to learn more and subscribe to our newsletter and reach out for more information. With that, I will turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Josh. Okay. Next up, we're going to move on to the main part of part one, which is our peer stories. So in these three presentations, our guest speakers from Shell, Linda, and Zachary will share their experience with AWP implementation. We're going to cover all three presentations and then have time at the end for questions for our presenters. So feel free to post questions in Slido throughout the presentations. All I would say is if you have a question for a specific one of our presenters, try to put that presenter's name at the start so we know who to direct the questions to. And first up amongst our presenters, we're fortunate to be joined by Jay Moser, the Principal Technical Expert Construction and the Global Head of Shell's Construction Community of Practice. Jay's also the Shell Global AWP Champion and one of the industry's leading advocates for advanced work packaging. Jay has spoken at numerous AWP conferences about Shell's AWP journey and how it aligns with their corporate vision. Today, we're going to focus on one very specific part of that process, namely the interaction with the contractors. Jay, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Andrew. Great to be here with you.
So what we're going to do first up is we're going to do a quick Q&A. So I've got a few questions I was hoping to put to you. The first one of those, is the use of AWP a requirement on capital projects for Shell?
Well, Andrew, not globally, but the requirements for AWP we have written in our model contract language for all of our projects to use. We like to really assess the projects to determine if implementation of AWP will move the needle on their project outcomes. So some projects are just don't have the scope or the amount of man hours compared to the overall project to make a huge impact. Therefore, AWP may not be a consistent approach for it.
Okay, thanks. Next up, is Shell using AWP across all project phases, or is it typically just limited to the construction phase?
Yeah, this is a conundrum a little bit, I guess. It's very dependent on the project and portfolio that you're looking at implementing AWP against. For example, we have scalable AWP, we call it, in our smaller portfolio projects, which are led by our asset project teams. There is a quick win on these projects when you implement, and I call it scalable, but really it's the workplace planning constraint management portion of AWP. So when we implement that, there is a fairly quick return because you can quickly see the issues that are in front of them and you're in execute. The problem with that is seen very much heavily led by construction. So the other folks in the project, the vendors, suppliers, engineering, and procurement don't get on board with the entire process. So it really makes it a little more difficult to implement for the construction staff. And I mean, ideally, what pops out real fast when you do this is the fact that you have constraints that are from not having engineering and procurement involved in the early process, and therefore those quickly come up when you start your IWP development. We don't have material, we don't have the right stuff to do the work. The IWPs are not unconstrained. There's constraints against them. So for most of the large projects, I would say we implement fully if possible, starting in very early select, or what we call select. I think as an industry, they may call it pre-feed.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, we do.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Next question. How do you see the role of engineering and procurement contractors versus construction contractors in terms of AWP and the implementation of AWP?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a question of treating these contractors any differently, but we need to make sure that they're aware of the requirements and what their role in the AWP process is going to be. The nature of what they're doing is going to be being asked to do will of course be very different in an EP versus a C. So we as owners just need to make sure that we set them up for success. In terms of engineering and procurement contractors, we really need to provide them the technical details, the data requirements. What are they? The first draft of our path of construction and our CWA setup. Ideally, they're going to be required to work against that path of construction and ultimately deliver against construction work packages with engineering work package release sequences, and that's just not the way they normally work. So it is a bit different. For the construction contractor, we want to understand what their method of execution is when it comes to work packaging requirements. They're going to ultimately be the beneficiaries and inheritors of the upstream EP work I just mentioned, if we do it properly, that they will need to make sure that the portion of the project that in the early phase and pre-feed and even in feed is there and ready for them, so that when they try to do their AWP implementation, which includes the IWP development and installation, that all the attributes, the information, the data is all right there for them to use. So, if Shell and the EPC or the EP contractor, if it's in an EP plus C, which is a separate construction from engineering procurement, if we do our jobs properly, then the advanced elements should help the construction contractor get consistent, executable, unconstrained work packages that are supported by all the necessary technical data that they need.
Yeah, and I think it's an important distinction. Some people don't realize that the advanced part of advanced work packaging is exactly that, is that pulling it forward to the earlier stages of a project. So moving gears for a second, how do you manage the technology side of the process when you're working with these contractors?
Yeah, I think everybody realizes that technology moves super fast. Looking at your phone, you can tell. I bet 90% of the people on this call today have changed their phone within the last year and have one or two version upgrades to that phone. So, that is an example. Just if you've been on a project for 3 to 5 years executing, and you come out of that and think about all the technology developments that have taken place over that period of time, it's very difficult to manage. So some contractors have their existing tools and processes and all that they need to do AWP, whether that be engineering, procurement, or construction. And ultimately, we want our program to be tool agnostic. So, we want to say, here's the data requirements. And I think those should be consistent. That is aligned with the industry now. The industry through CII has put out those data standards. And if everybody uses that, the likes of us, all the owners, we don't need to ask the contractors to redo it for a Shell or redo it for somebody else. So having integrated tools and technology really are keys. They allow us to support better constraint management, better visibility into the daily work, but also the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day look ahead. So it really impacts the potential for your mission control room, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, in the industry used to be called a war room, but it's that daily meeting that you have as a project team to say, what are we doing today? What are we doing in 30 days? And making sure you're dealing with the latest information and not, you know, a P6 schedule that is a month old or weeks old at best, and having to dig through thousands of lines of Gantt charts that you may or may not see the real problem. So this gives us a little bit of a better visibility and better discussion with what we're needing to do as a project in conjunction with the contractors, whether they be the constructor or the EP or both. And also it gives us, you know, the ability to consider some of these things at the bid phase. So we do want to understand at the bid phase what that looks like from a contract perspective. I would say that if the contractors don't have the expertise, that's not a showstopper. We do have flexibility that allows us to have standards that we have set up internally that we can help with, so the contractors that are less AWP mature, you know, can experience some of the benefits of utilizing digital technologies or solutions that help the whole process.
Okay, fantastic. Next question, is AWP adoption a significant step change in the way that the projects are being executed within Shell?
Yeah, so I'm glad this is the last question, Andrew. It shouldn't be. I mean, how long has AWP been out there? AWP process has been out for quite some time. 272, you know, was written, I don't remember the day, what was it, 06, 319 in 2015. I mean, I may be off on the dates, but that's a long time ago, okay? It's over 10 years. So it shouldn't be, but the fact of the matter is, it kind of is. We cannot keep operating with declining productivity rates, schedule and cost overruns. And now we really have an issue, as you all know, with supply chain in the industry. We have an issue with people and resources, and not only getting them, but having skilled resources to do the work. So processes like AWP are going to be more and more dependent on to help us get through these kinds of things. So, you know, if we can't continue to improve doing the things the way they have been, it's just going to make us harder to justify spending capital in the project space. And that's not a good thing. We have it available. We need to do it. We need to grow. But, you know, I think we look at what happened in the industry with safety, Andrew, and safety is a license to operate. And when the owner said, look, we have to have this or we're going to shut down, we improved. We have processes, procedures, and ways of working now that have really improved safety over the years. I think we really have to look at productivity in that same light, and whether or not AWP, you know, can support that step change. I think it can. It needs to be the vehicle for that step change, in my opinion. You know, we're going to continue to set this bar high on productivity, and we'll probably keep raising it. But when EPCs adopt the AWP process themselves and not have the owner say, hey, thou shalt, or do it because they say it, they need to have it built into their own system and way of working, which will ultimately support improved execution for themselves and maximize their own value. So when that occurs, I think the AWP will be the industry norm, and these improvements will benefit not just the owners, but the contractors and everybody that's involved. So maybe just to finish, Andrew, you know, I personally believe that the industry needs to consider how we look at AWP cost and schedule and return on investment benefits a bit differently. You know, I see AWP as a collaborative, agile process, which does provide cost and schedule avoidance, and it reduces our risks because they're identified as planned better. And reducing our risk ultimately reduces the use of our contingency that we put in our projects when we schedule them. So you might say, well, isn't that a savings? And in a way, it is a savings But we can't capture that as savings because, yes, it will reduce cost. It may reduce schedule. It may make us more predictable. But those things aren't going to change the way we estimate and schedule and the way our project estimates are built up and the way that IPA, for instance, views our benchmarking data that says, hey, if we build this unit, it should cost this much money. And those best in class projects are benchmarked against industry norms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the norms that you build those off of, those call them placement norms or whatever you want to, you know, tons of steel, et cetera, et cetera. Until we can consistently prove, and the EPCs can prove, that they can improve their hands-on tool time, they can reduce this placement cost, these norms, to where we can easily justify changing our cost estimates and our schedule estimates. You know, at that point, I think we can say that we can claim at least to have the capability to be world-class project delivery. And right now, that's going to take some time changing these norms. But to me, we've got to get there, and I think AWP is the path. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jay. Next up, I understand that you have a video that you want to share with us.
Yeah, just to set that up, Andrew, I thought it might be good for folks to see. This is just one project that has done a webcast, and we just took the clip of this project out of it. You're going to see our lead, information lead on the project, Jerome Jamet, and also you're going to see with the second video, our project manager for this project, Rob Snorum, and he's going to talk about the benefits, but Jerome is going to talk about the journey of how they're using AWP on the project. So go ahead.
Fantastic. Tara, if you can cue up the video. Thank you.
We are to this phase where Jerome tells us the journey for how to implement it.
Yep, thank you, Rob. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jerome, and I am lead on the Red to Green project. Over the next few slides, I will be providing an overview of our AWP journey and how O3, the application that we use to support AWP, was rolled out. So what you can see on screen are the key steps taken by the project to implement and embed an advanced work packaging process, starting at select on the left-hand side and moving over to execute. This is important because it provides an understanding of, one, the enablers of AWP, and more importantly, the timing and order of each key activity. So starting in select, the project made a key decision to implement AWP across the full scope of the project. This decision was made by Rob and the leadership team, and it resulted in the formation of the AWP team. The AWP team is led by construction. However, I'm also part of the AWP team. I've been part of the AWP team for the last 2 years, and I provide more of a technical IT enabling role. Once the AWP team has been formed or was formed, for the remainder of Select, they were responsible for carrying out 3 key activities. Firstly, it was a series of workshops and coffee corners, bringing the project team up to speed with AWP and the benefits. 2, working alongside key functions, example, contracts, procurement, engineering, discussing and agreeing the impact of AWP on their current working methods. And lastly, a piece which I led, identifying target authoring applications, example P6, SI, and working along with the business owners to figure out how these changes that we're implementing through adopting an AWP workflow will affect their systems. Moving into the second swim lane, which is define. Define began really focusing on the requirements which needed to be included in our contracts to enable the delivery of advanced work packaging. Simply put, what did engineer need to provide and how did our contractors need to use this data that was provided by engineering? These requirements were very specific, but not excessive. So for example, for a clause included in our contracts for our EPs was to deliver AFC deliverables related to a construction work package. In parallel, in Define, we also developed our AWP plan and issued it. During Define, we also began looking at different technologies which could be used for the management of our AWP process. We created a list of key requirements and assessed all the potential applications against those requirements. We looked internally within Shell and Worley, but we also looked externally at other applications that have been used within the industry. And in according with this selection process, we selected O3, which I'll provide an overview of shortly. Following this decision to implement O3 on the Red to Green project, we invested around 3 to 4 months working alongside O3, developing key functionality and making sure that the application was ready for use before release. Also, we defined key data exchanges, data handovers, data inputs that were required to feed O3, because O3 is a data aggregation platform and is only as good as the data you put into the system. At the beginning of Execute, we implemented the first release of O3 to our civil contractors, which was not without its challenges. However, so far, the feedback that we've received have been positive, so this is great. And we will continue to develop the application for the foreseeable future and well into Execute to ensure that we get the most value out of O3. Next slide, please, Josie. Now, what is O3? Okay, where do I start? So O3 is a cloud-based, purpose-built advanced work packaging tool. It allows the project, Red to Green, to deliver all the data related to a construction work package to a field contractor. So this provides a single entry point for our field contractors to reliably and easily access all the data related to a construction work package. And when I refer to data here, I'm referring to not only documents, I'm talking about structured data in Excel spreadsheets or structured data delivered through O3 or even the 3D model. In addition, the field contractor has the ability to come into O3, create, manage, and execute field installation work packages through the platform. Now, how are we, Red to Green, using O3 today? We're using it for 5 key functionality. And if O3 probably has about 50, but currently we're using 5, which are pretty important to our project. The first one, we are managing and monitoring the completeness of a construction work package. This ensures that all our construction work packages have the required information and go through the same checks and balances. Secondly, we are managing the review and release process of a construction work package by contracting and construction before releasing to field contractors, making sure that all the key stakeholders have visibility of the construction work package before it's released externally. Thirdly, we're using O3 as a vehicle for exchanging or delivering all AFC documents to our field contractors. Next, we're managing the contractor acknowledgements that the package has been received, and more importantly, that they're able to begin work on that construction work package once received. And lastly, we're using O3 for delivering the 3D model, which you can see a nice picture of at the bottom of the images. Now, delivering these capabilities at such an early stage of the project have really put us in a great position for the management and control of documents during construction. Next big milestone for O3 on the Red to Green project is related to material availability and the creation of field installation work packages for piping, which will be available later this year. And yeah, hopefully we'll be invited back to give you a live demonstration of how that works, because it's perhaps a lot more impressive than obviously managing documents, but documents are very important, obviously. Would you go to the next slide, please, Josie? Okay, so this is a snapshot of the data architecture for the red to green project. And the importance of this, it shows you the complexity of all the data inputs that you need to put into a system like O3 before you can actually start using O3. So on the left-hand side, we have the applications that we currently have connected to O3. Some of these connections are fully automatic and most of them are semi-automatic. Now, starting at the top and going down.
Okay, I think Tori, that's enough on that one. Just for the audience to set this up a bit more, I wanted to make sure you were aware this is a contract type is an EP and a separate C. So in this case, you know, we're utilizing the platform as described here in order to do the engineering procurement work, with the expectation that the construction portion of the work would be executed in the same manner with the tools. So the next video that you'll see is one of the project manager for Red to Green, Rob Snoren, and he's going to give you just a real brief thing on what the benefits are.
So the industry is heading into this. We were a little bit behind, I believe, within Shell, but catching up quickly there. And the main, of course, objective is that it supports our efficient execution requirements. Because there is so much clarity on the packages. Instead of giving everything to a contractor and hope that he will be done at a certain point, you can track the smaller packages over time from a cost, schedule, and even quality perspective overall. And as you are going into the field much more prepared, we also believe that helps us in our quality and safety, because that's really linked to the work preparation side itself. And the other part we do see is with our next step into O3, we also engaged early with our implementation contractors. And because of the way we work together, we are making some of their systems redundant. But it also means we're taking out steps which you normally saw in the past. We as Shell handed over a package to a contractor loaded in their own system. But now what we're doing is merging those two systems and take the double systems out of the total package. So overall, it also improves the contractor efficiency and thereby also directly our own efficiency. This is the part where I believe we want to stop. I think there's 4 minutes left for Q&As.
Thanks, Tori. Just a couple comments here. I think I was on mute a minute ago. I apologize, but I think setting this up just to make sure you were aware, this is a example was an EP separate from C contract where we worked in collaboration with the EP, and the C has yet to be completed, of course, but the plans are in place. And this kind of just gives you an example of how AWP can be managed, you know, on a project. So hopefully that's helpful, Andrew.
Fantastic. Jay, thank you very, very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. For the audience, as I mentioned, we're going to hold questions until the end once all three of our presenters have spoken. So we will have time to have those conversations and have those Q&A addressed at the end. If you have any such questions, please put them in the Slido reference. And with that, we're going to move on to our second speaker. So thank you very much to Jay. Our next speaker is Eric Leimer, AWP Program Manager and Head of the AWP Core Team at Linde Engineering. Eric has held several positions at Linde in engineering, process, and QHSE management. Eric's the project director for Linde's scope on the ethylene plant at the Pennsylvania Petrochemicals Complex. You may recognize Eric. He spoke last year at the AWP xChange about integrated EPC planning and execution. And today he's going to be talking us through implementing AWP and workplace planning. So hello, Eric, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew, for the introduction. So yeah, today I will talk about the last mile of AWP and how we collaborate with our construction partners in AWP and workplace planning, and also which lessons learned we have taken on our AWP journey. When I talk about construction partners, basically we treat consortium partners and subcontractors, more or less in this regard, also is the same. So when I speak about construction partners, it's really meaning both. Just a very short introduction about Linde that you can kind of relate what I tell here to our business. Yeah, so Linde PLC overall is having 80,000 employees, and we have this integrated business model of the gases division and the engineering division. So the engineering division, where I'm working for, is having 7,300 employees. We are doing EP and EPC projects for third parties, and of course also for our gases division. And you see here on the right side our portfolio. Yeah, so it's going quite across. And as you see also on the footprint, so we have a quite global footprint and work basically in all regions. So try to get to the next slide here. So this is just a brief summary from my presentation last year when I was talking about the integrated EPC planning and execution. And we heard this also from Jay before. It's very important that AWP is not only started when it comes kind of to the finish line, to construction. And I would just elaborate here once again that Linde's understanding and also our processes are set up that AWP is an integral part starting from the concept phase, where we do the front-loaded path of construction, where we set up first an integrated EPC concept schedule. Before then we move this and transfer this into a level 3 schedule. In EP execution, then it's about tracking EWPs and procurement work packages, so meaning the material for one construction work package. With the respective constraint management, supply chain management is very much in the focus here. And last but not least, control CWP handoff to construction. And I will come back to this also when regarding the collaboration with our construction partners. Today, I will focus more on the workplace planning and site execution. So in addition to the points mentioned here, I will now elaborate how we work with our construction partners throughout the different project phases with regard to implementing AWP and workplace planning. So before I get to the individual steps of the phases, I would first like to really summarize what are the benefits which we would try to achieve for AWP and workplace planning. So the starting point is, and I think this is a benefit for our construction partners, because we start so early in sequencing the work and focusing of getting EP deliverables as per the construction sequence. And EP deliverables means material drawings and also data. I think this is a very good support for predictable work fronts, which is of course benefit for the overall success of the project. Yeah. Next part is of course the integration of AWP and workplace planning into the planning and controls. So this provides a good planning for the execution, which definitely has a positive impact on safety because there's less surprises. But the main part is also about transparency and seeing the truth and maintaining this in a collaborative manner, so that there's not different versions of the truth. And of course, then also to keep up the in-sequence execution, because we sequence our work very much. So it's also important that, of course, construction follows that sequence. Of course, I think this is the main benefit, which is promoted also by CII. It's about increased field efficiency. This is, of course, what we want to leverage together with our construction partners and schedule certainty. But last but not least, at the end, it's about competitiveness. Yeah? And competitiveness, cost-efficient projects means this starts with our clients, that they can have projects, and I think Jay mentioned this very well. But it's of course also cost efficiency for us as the overall EPC contractor, but also for our construction partners that they manage their scope cost efficiently. And at the end, I think this is where the industry needs to aim at, that we get here a win-win solution for project stakeholders, because I think flawless execution is really for the benefit of everybody. So with that in mind, I would like to walk through now the different phases. So similar to this select, define, execute, yeah, I've called it here partnering, work phase planning, setup, and site execution. I will walk through these different phases, and first I would like to start here with the partnering. So we include AWP and work phase planning in our invitation to tender and also in our draft and final subcontracts. So this is clearly embedded in it. We conduct now workshops with all construction or potential construction partners. Here it has really proven very important that these workshops are joined by the management level from our construction partners as well as the project level, because at the end, if they are not aligned, we will not be successful. So the topics which we cover is that we explain Linde's AWP approach for EP, because I think it's very important that we take an investment in AWP and work phase planning. We take an extra effort, and of course we want to get the benefit back. Then how we typically structure work phase planning, execution at site. So we explain our approach, and we also explain the integrated construction work phase planning platform. So this means for Linde, we have a so-called construction management system, which is the material warehouse, welding and mechanical completion system, which is closely interlinked with O3. So we have built various automized APIs in between. So this is kind of one integrated platform now. The feedback from the various workshops for various projects which we have done in APAC and EMEA is that construction partners are typically have a limited experience. So there's definitely a range with regard to the experience. Almost all had some level of familiarization and experience. Generally, we get positive feedback. It seemed positive because also our construction partners realize that this is an opportunity to mitigate their execution risk. Where we see an issue is, of course, that at the end, because we work mostly with unit rate contracts, we so far still face limited confidence by our construction partners to price in efficiency gains from AWP and work phase planning. And this is definitely something which we need to change, which we need to discuss further, because at the end, we can only end up in this win-win situation, which I've explained before, if you really get this also aligned with the contractor. And I think this will gradually definitely be more in the focus. So now I would like to come, there is the button, to the work phase planning setup. So this list here is kind of the key bullet points which we run through and align with our construction partners during the work phase planning setup. So we have kind of standard work phase planning procedure, but at the end, this work phase planning procedure is issued by our construction partners. So we walk this through, we align it with them. We, of course, build in the specifics for the project. Typically, during the contracting phase, we have defined already the CWAs, but we walk them through, we align them. What we definitely align is the CWPs and the execution task types, because this is very important to kind of mirror image the structure and also to set up O3. Then we need, of course, to set up the man-hour norms for work phase planning so that we can budget the IWPs. If the construction partners do pipe and steel prefab, there we also need to align on some data requirements so that we can utilize graphical work packaging in O3. And then it's about the workplace planning setup and configuration, which is done together with O3 by us and the construction partner. Last but not least, reporting formats, dashboards, organizational setup. I will focus a little bit on the next slide. And of course, last but not least, training material and setting up and organizing the training. So here, this is a typical organizational setup, which I think should not be new to anybody here. But I just would like to highlight what we really figured out from the lessons learned, what is important. Yeah. So you see here the role of the workplace planning coordinator. So this is what we have identified as really key, that workplace planning, AWP, is a collaborative effort at site execution. So we contribute with the workplace planning coordinator who is reporting to our construction manager, but also working together with project information manager and the AWP core team. And they closely align and also lead the workplace planners organization from a kind of functional point. The workplace planners of the contractors, they need to report into their construction organization. So typically the superintendents, we had bad experience if they were more reporting to planning. So this needs to be really built into the construction organization. But of course, there's also close alignment with project controls. When we come then to site execution, so site execution really starts with Linde releasing the CWPs. I think we have seen that also in the Shell video. That's the starting point for construction. So it's about, are the EWPs, the documents, are they complete? So formally released, and also the procurement work package, so the material for CWP. Is there sufficient material coverage confirmed at the start point so that we can release the work package? But it's also about data update, upload to our CMS system and O3, which is basically the definitions of CWPs, EWPs, the documents per EWP, components and associated material, and 3D model. Then the next part is, and this is a collaborative effort from the contractor on our side, facilitated by our workplace planning coordinator. What is really important is the integrated planning sessions with construction to break down the CWPs. Then also aligning the construction execution and workplace planning so that there is kind of not two understandings of what is the plan. Of course, we review certain quality criteria regarding the packages, but also including QHSE requirements. We also, and this is also going back to the EP part, that we can generate sufficient work fronts and IWPs, and last but not least, of course, to follow up on timely closure of IWPs. The last bullet point was something which maybe we had a little bit too little on the radar screen, because material management is kind of proven. We have built APIs to clearly assign material to the IWP, so that was all done. But I think it's really important that we also set up the processes at the site, that the material management is closely involved in it, that they have timely receiving of the material, that they put also the data into the systems, that it's registered, and also formal release, so that we can have proper material coverage analysis, and also that the material is issued to the field, to the supervisor, IWP by IWP. So that's very key to have here integrated workflows with workplace planning for material management. So last but not least, I would like to summarize and close out with some lessons learned. So Linde started very much on the EP side for the AWP journey, and in our first pilot project, we just applied a kind of light version of workplace planning with quite little leadership by Linde. and we had to realize that this was not very successful. There was a mismatch between the construction and the workplace planning organization, and also the involvement of subcontractors was kind of turning upside down the execution sequence. So this is something which we have definitely changed. Key is really the integrated workplace planning software platform, so that the construction partners and Linde work in the same software environment, use the same tool to have one truth. So this is very much key. It's about this release process of CWPs, so that we just don't throw bits and pieces over the fence, that we really release holistic CWPs to our construction partners. Integration of the AWP work breakdown structure into project control, so that the level 3, level 4 schedule is broken down by CWPs. And what we have also learned and will focus more is that progress reporting is also done by work packages. Yeah? So this is the next step which we will take, but this was actually initiated by one of our construction partners, that they really want to take this holistic approach. Workplace planning coordination at site, as I said, that we have the workplace planning coordinated by Linde, that the construction organization workplace planning team is really an integrated team on both sides, Linde and our construction partner, and very important also that subcontractors, including fabricators, are part of the workplace planning. And last but not least, I'd summarize material management, so that this is closely integrated. Yeah. So that is what I wanted to convey. Yeah. And I would like to hand over back to Andrew. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Eric. We appreciate you running us through that. And last but by no means least, our last guest speaker of the day is Duncan Turner, who is a project engineer with the Zachary Information Technology and Information Management Group. Duncan has implemented O3 and other software systems to support AWP on the Golden Pass LNG project, and he's going to be talking to us about the importance of data in AWP. Duncan, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. So, first slide, I'm going to talk a little bit of my background just for context. The topic that I'm going to discuss and go through is leveraging data to simplify the AWP process. So previous speakers have touched on integrations and moving different parts of data. I'm going to delve a little bit more deeply into that. So my background, what really got me into data goes right back to 1995 and a computer science A-level prior to a mechanical engineering degree, and then working for a vendor, we would call it now, from an EPC perspective, Atlas Copco, who made air compressor skid packages. After that, I moved to a pipeline operator that fed fuel from refineries to Heathrow and Gatwick airports. 2005, there was a large explosion, so I spent a few years clearing up the mess and working out how we would redesign a new oil storage terminal. After that, I moved to the construction of a proper EPC project, a pipeline and 2 compressor stations from the country Georgia through Azerbaijan and then into Georgia, which then fed through to Europe. That pipeline is situated, takes oil from the Caspian Sea and through to the western existing infrastructure. After the EPC project, which wasn't actually an AWP project, so I got to see firsthand the challenges of very difficult and quite often unstructured data. From there, I moved to a much larger project, the TCO project, based in the engineering offices in Farnborough, the TCO project is very, very large. It's a modular project. The third generation gas processing facility and the 3GI third generation injection part. Those two very large ME&I contracts and a number of smaller ones. So I worked between the engineer in Farnborough with a couple of thousand engineers and offshore design houses, and the construction teams on site in Kazakhstan, and procurement was done from Farnborough and a number of other offices. So that was the first sort of role that I worked on within AWP, and we did use O3 on that project, but not to the extent that I'm going to explain on this new project that I'm working on and have been for the past couple of years. So the next slide is going to go into the Golden Pass project, which is an LNG facility on the east coast of the US, taking gas and compressing it. Oh, I think I've clicked the wrong button. Okay, so this is our diagram, which has gone through multiple iterations. It's an overview of all of the 80 odd databases and systems that we use for the Golden Pass project. So in the center of here, we called this the spider diagram. Initially, it was quite different, and you can see an older version on the wall behind me. The central part of this diagram is the Azure Data Factory, which we use for the transformation of data. And around that, there's an outer box called the IMS, the Integration Management System, which we use for the export and the load of data, so and coordinating the movement of data between different systems. So some people will call that orchestration. So from these 80 odd databases, we're constantly taking data out, exporting, transforming it or merging it with different data from other systems, and then exporting it and loading it to the receiving or consuming system. So that hub and spoke method, it's not a circle, but if you imagine if we drew that as a circle in the center and all these lines radiated out, that hub and spoke method is absolutely core to the leveraging the value of the interfaces between these data systems. The massive advantage of doing it in this method rather than many direct integrations is we can significantly reduce the latency challenges by ensuring that a source file will always be from one system into the center and then radiate out to 2 or 3, maybe 4 multiple consuming downstream systems. So how do we get to this point? There were meetings in Japan before I joined the project with the JV partners for the Golden Pass project, which include Chiyoda, the engineering JV partner, Zachary and McDermott both have a construction scope. Chiyoda also do the procurement. So quite a number of these systems are Chiyoda and engineering systems, engineering procurement. Some are McDermott, and quite a large number are Zachary systems. And the central, the ADF, the hub is Zachary's managed piece. With this setup, what we found, we've got such a large amount of data flowing that so just methods that we use differ depending on source and consuming systems. So we've got different flow rates, if you like, coming from a pipeline background. Some of these integrations will be passing data daily, hourly, weekly. We do full loads from some systems, so we'll replace all the data in system B with the new data that we've extracted today from system A. And we use different formats, Excel, CSV, JSON, text files. All of that we can define up front in specifications for the data transformation aspect, and we can do all of that work within this Azure Data Factory. So once the list of systems had been negotiated by the JV partners, it was all documented into an integration, an ITIM plan, published, agreed, signed off by everybody, and we moved forward from there. As the project has evolved, we have added, I'd say, 5 to possibly nearly 10% additional systems, as we've either had client requests or different partners have wanted to do add into additional functionality. What we're doing on, I'll dive into the next slide if it works. So the diagram on the left is where we were a year ago, and this is more of a detailed dive into O3 and the implementation of that project. So we implemented O3 with assistance from the O3 team. They helped us the whole way through. We used O3 to manage the implementation of building the interfaces with O3, which is like, once you see it, you can probably see from the later conversations how that will work. The task management functionality, the Agile task boards allowed us to constantly keep track of information flow between our team and the O3 team. We found in the configuration of the system there were certain actions where we needed to request O3 take away and enhance some of the functionality. They'd take that back to their development team, and then we would just track all of that work within the O3 task system, which proved to be very good. So the diagram on the left is where we were a year ago. The diagram on the right is where we are now, and as you can see, we've had significant growth in the number of files that are moving from systems on the left, the source system, to the O3 system on the right. Apologies that the resolution is not brilliant on this, but you can have a closer look when these slides get issued out. So on the left, we started with about 6 different source systems. Material management was core, documents, the P6 data, and then 3 others, model data from the Construct Sim modeling software. The transformation of that, initially we focused on highest value, getting data in as fast as we could, and then we built on an iterative basis if we found that was feedback from users to say, look, we'd like this to work slightly differently, could you make this in a different way? We'd either modify the format of the data or the frequency of the integration, or as you can see from the right, we built quite a lot of new data integrations that will, many of those have come from feedback from the users, the construction team, the workplace planners who are using this package to put together the installation work packs, manage through the dashboards the progress of the work. So what we were using O3 for, so there's 2 main pieces. Constraint management is absolutely core to the purpose. In order to manage the constraints that we anything that stops construction occurring, we want to know about as soon as possible. And so by bringing in and aggregating the data from the document system, we can put that into installation work packages, and we can constantly, through feeding the data from the document management system, see the revisions of the documents and the revision status is. So is it issued for construction or is it issued for review? From those statuses, we can either automatically create a constraint or close a constraint. And that enables the planners to see through the dashboards the status of their IWPs in their discipline or their area, and manage those constraints through to resolution, picking up the phone, talking to engineering, weekly meetings, however they manage those, using the O3 tools, tasks to put actions on people and close out these constraints. And they can have threaded conversations and track the audit history of each of those constraints to make sure that they've got the thread of who's holding the ball and nothing gets lost. Having that visibility and accountability all in one tool is absolutely superb compared to trying to manage that through multiple silos and Excel sheets and out-of-date trackers and people picking up wrong information. The confusion that you get, which has gone away to a large degree through building these integrations and aggregating this data into one platform. How much time have I got left, Andrew, just so I don't overrun?
We're coming up on it pretty hard here, Duncan, so probably 3 or 4 minutes at the most.
Okay, right. So the containerization, so building integrations from the document management system to package CWPs, putting the document to a CWP relationship, what O3 terms, associations, that data is coming as integrations, installation work packages to documents coming from the document management system, and the latest revisions will come through. Design change notes, we are managing those within O3, and FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we have packages of documents that need to be submitted to them, and we are using O3 in order to create constraints and manage those to make sure that those are visible and on the radar of everybody involved. So it's lots of different buckets, but all very interrelated. The next slide is a little bit about the Agile approach. So we focused on from the very beginning, system selection, picking the best-in-class systems, focus on highest value activity first. We've used O3's Agile boards to manage O3 implementation. We've used the ADF, the Azure Data Factory Agile boards to manage all integrations across the multiple systems. And this enables us to take cards, which is very similar to how O3's you can use the cards from the left, the definition funnel of gathering the requirements from the business, pulling it through to review and estimate the time to do the work. But the in development column, move it to done, and then testing, which is absolutely key part of the work that we do. Test, 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 test. You cannot test enough. Test till you break it. That's one of my favorite sayings. Try to break it. If you can break it in testing, then you will break it when it's in production. So best break it in testing, and work as hard as you can to break things. The next piece, just going to talk about. So we've really focused on automation where possibly can, as you can see. And this project, compared to any of the previous projects I've worked on, we've really taken that to the next level. It's on steroids. We've really pushed data integrations and this aggregation and containerization and agile approach to the maximum, much more than any EPC I've ever seen do before. So the next few slides I'm going to quickly flick through because time's short. Some examples of dashboards. We really leave the creation of dashboards to a large degree up to the business, which we consider the planners, the construction team, the project controls team, and we've found they've really proliferated. And at one point we actually had to pull that back and say, look, these are the favorite dashboards, and they've got a structured hierarchy tree of these are the ones, the official ones that are used for reporting. Everybody else is allowed to build whatever they like, which is using the same source data, but they can fine tune it to their own work area or discipline or particular topic of interest. So this one, next one's Rfi Dashboard, so requests for information, and we can have teams monitoring those. The FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which would be similar for many countries. This is a US specific regulatory organization, but Europe will have it and other countries too. So you can configure O3 to do and call these things as you need for your specific project. Document design change note dashboard, and so this is absolutely key interface between engineering and construction. It's really can be a high source of friction, and it's absolutely key to keep on top of this and have a very fast tool for dealing with those and the tracking and auditing of communication. CLP release, so this will be more of a project controls level, a higher level view. And then very briefly, lessons learned. So second law of dynamics, thermodynamics, chaos will reign. Structure and order is what we're aiming for. And that's why having a huge amount of testing is absolutely vital. In the funnel of requirements gathering, making sure you've got all the requirements, you build mock-ups, you test for the scale, you test for compatibility between systems, invest early in the systems that you want. You can't be too early with the deployment of technology, really. Right at the beginning, as the Shell guys were talking about in the define stage, select define, right up front is the best time to be talking about and testing and building these sorts of things, because there's a lot of time and effort involved with the implementation. And you can get something up and running quick, but to get it to work to the absolute optimum, as you see, it takes time and it takes users in the system and it takes feedback from those users and the iterations of we would like this and this and this, gathering those and defining and building them take quite a lot of effort. The little sign on the side, this is something we've had to do occasionally to explain that things will be challenging, and that's part of the journey. But I think stick at it and focus and look at the highest value first, and really focus on what you want and the end consumer construction at all times. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And thank you very much to our presenters from Shell, Linda and Zachary, for joining us today and sharing their experiences. So now, before we take a short break, we're going to give you, the audience, a chance to ask questions of our panelists. So like we mentioned before, please put your questions in Slido with the AWP xChange QA as the hashtag. And we're going to jump over to Slido and take a look and see what questions we've got. And we're going to try to keep this to just a few minutes. Okay. Jay, I'm going to start with you because I see one right there in the middle with your name on it. So does Shell start all AWP projects in the select phase?
Okay, Andrew. No, not necessarily. Again, the smaller portfolio jobs that we, maybe implementing in the assets might not get to the level of pre-feed or select phase AWP work. So no, not in every case, but I would say that the norm for any larger project would be yes.
Excellent, thank you. Eric, one here for you. How do you see O3 solutions being helpful in contact management? That may mean to say contract management in terms of field or installation contractors.
Yeah, first of all, O3 Solutions is not a contract management regarding management of payments and changes and so on. So I think this is not the prime focus of it. Of course, it's a common collaboration platform where we provide data, where they define their work packages. As I said in my presentation, where we focus more on is also measuring progress by work packages and so on. There, of course, it goes a little bit closer to contract management, but I would really, it's an execution tool and not a contract management tool.
Fantastic. The greatest challenge for AWP adoption is the resistance or inertia by stakeholders at the engineering phase, especially engineers. Moved. So, okay, I'll jump on to a different one. Duncan, I've got one here for you. Any specific major challenges to implementing AWP from contractors' view, and how do you see mitigating those challenges? So what was the greatest challenge for you in implementing AWP?
Definitely people is one factor. I think the communication is classic project management. Gathering requirements is a challenge because everybody has a slightly different view sometimes. It depends how, I guess, well written and defined the AWP procedures are at the beginning. But we did find a very useful approach to that was having business people, say the senior work phase planners in the room when we were configuring O3 to make sure we would mock things up. So we had two projects in O3, an implementation and a production. Production was the live one, and the implementation one was where we would mock things up and present them to the business and go back and forth. Do you like this? Do you want it like this? Do you want to use revision status, or do you want to use revision as a means to create and close constraints? So right down to the nth degree of detail, we would go back and forth and building mock-ups, presenting to people an example was really useful method, I think, to get feedback, let them see it, because you can show them a very dry and boring spec that just maps columns in system A to columns in system B, go and build it, and then they say, don't like that, didn't want that. And you spent 3 weeks doing that, and it's a waste of effort, or at least you're losing time. So the fastest method is get some data in with an Excel sheet, load it, show them that. Is that what you want the output to look like? Yes, no, okay, right, go ahead and build it.
Excellent, thank you. Jay, another one for you. Are you seeing a trend of more contractors becoming familiar with AWP in any particular region?
Well, yeah, Andrew, I think, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, it was AWP was very North American centric, if you will. I think there's been a lot of effort with the likes of CII and Group ASI and, you know, the communities of practice, which are global now, integrating ECI, the European Construction Institute, into the efforts we're doing as well. So it's gone global, and there are pockets of excellence everywhere. But I would say, you know, even between the likes of a Houston, a New Orleans, and a Calgary office of the same contractor could have, you know, 0 to 100% difference in AWP capability and maturity. So yeah, it is global, and it's getting better, for sure. And maybe Andrew, just to answer that top question, because you asked it earlier, about the greatest challenges. You know, from my perspective, it's always going to be tough to change. Change management is a big issue, and when you say do something different to an engineering company, for instance, where the majority of the digital threads sit, it is going to change them, and they say, well, it's going to cost you more money. Well, it's going to cost more money maybe to set it up initially. My point in my discussion with you earlier in the interviews was, you know, take the initiative. If you as a contractor are not seeing value in this process, maybe you need to get in another business. So the point is, take that effort, make it your own, do what you want to with it. There's a million technologies and ways to do it out there, and a lot of support that can help you. So you need to take that step, but once you see that you have implemented it, you will then reduce your time, reduce your effort, reduce your request for information, and increase your productivity. And that's when, again, we will all see this as a win.
Absolutely. And just given the time we have, I'll ask one last question. Eric, do you ever get your construction contractors involved during the pre-feed or feed stage, so select define?
So this is, of course, definitely something which we would like to see and do. It depends really about the contracting strategy. So typically we will involve in the pre-feed or feed phase construction contractors regarding applying AWP and work phase planning. We conduct these workshops in this phase, but really working the path of construction, defining CWAs and so on. This is typically only possible when we go with consortium partners, because consortium partners are typically selected much earlier than typical subcontractors, because there we are still in a competition phase. So we cannot involve them as we would like. So this is the limitation, but we try to involve them as soon as possible.
Fantastic. And for anybody else who asked any questions, we will combine those questions and put them through to our panelists here after the fact and share those with you afterwards. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Great to see 3 different companies represented, 3 different time zones, 2 different continents. So great to have such a breadth of knowledge. We are now going to take a short break. We're going to come back in 5 minutes to start our second session. So we will join at 35 minutes past the hour, and I won't try to guess whichever time zone everyone's in, but please come back and see us in 5 minutes. Gents, thanks very much for joining us again.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. Welcome back to the AWP XChange. Hopefully everyone had a chance to grab a quick beverage in the break. We're now going to be moving on to part 2, which is going to focus on technology and tools. So in this session, we're going to show you some of the exciting software developments that O3 has produced since our last AWP XChange back in 2021. Josh will then answer some questions about the role that the contractor plays in technology on AWP projects. And lastly, I'll be guiding you through the minefield of contractual requirements for AWP and showing some of the tools and support available to contractors who are starting on their AWP journey. So, first up, we'll discuss AWP technology and the updates to the O3 platform in the last year. To run us through this important topic, I'm pleased to introduce Colin Budker, who is O3's product manager. Colin, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. Today we'll be reviewing our significant changes and development focuses from the last year. Looks like I don't have control of the slides. We can go ahead and hit next slide for me, please. Thank you. So to kick us off, our overall goal from this past year was to simplify the AWP implementation and improve collaboration across our stakeholders on projects. O3 already provides the market-leading AWP and workplace planning solution. A big part of our advantage comes in our ability to enable collaboration, managing our tasks, constraints, and packages on a given project. This year, we decided to double down on the success to provide our projects with even more value. So keeping with Duncan's presentation, we expanded our data management capabilities to further simplify the AWP process with additional automation and tracking. We also expanded our abilities for engineering and construction to coordinate and keep everyone in the loop with change management. Finally, we expanded our abilities for everyone to understand how those parts fit together with model and status visualization, through additional model formats, automated packaging, and visualizations. We'll walk through each one of these areas, why they mattered, and we'll show you what changed. So we'll start off with data management. So data forms the baseline of any AWP project. Proper data management makes the AWP process simpler and more efficient. O3 has been successfully implemented on projects with flat file and API integrations. We decided to expand this functionality to double down on the success. Specifically, we focused on 3 areas: clearly defining our needs, tracking our results, and simplifying communication. To define our data needs, we start by determining what is required for each of our packages on a given project. We then make these requirements easily accessible to the users directly through O3 and let them use these requirements to import data. To make sure these needs are met, we've made it even easier to track results, giving teams a way to set and forget mappings for each data deliverable with alerts, notifications, and reporting to make sure that these data needs are satisfied. Finally, we made it simpler to communicate the data in the system with more control to hide extraneous data and dynamic templates to adjust and show data when it is applicable or hide it when it's not. These 3 efforts have enhanced the data management process in O3, making the AWP process on our project simpler and more efficient. And now Tori will show you a video of some of the changes that we made in O3. Let's take a look at how O3 has improved data management to help make the AWP process simpler and more efficient. We first expanded our ability to define our data needs within O3. The first step in the data management process is to set our requirements. From our project settings, we can set which fields are always required in order to create a particular work package, which are required for data complete for the sake of reporting, and which are required for a package to be closed out. This flexibility allows us to make sure that the necessary data is always provided. Once this information is set, we can go to data requirements to see the necessary information. Using this tool, we're able to generate import templates and define workbooks of data requirements to send out to any necessary stakeholders who will be providing information. Next, we expanded our ability to track results across our fields, format, and frequency. In data deliverables, we can define various data sources. For each one of these sources, we can configure field mappings to map fields between headers, as well as combine certain fields and use conditional formatting. Once our requirements are mapped, we can define a responsible party for defining the source and for importing it into O3. Throughout the process, we can use data management dashboards to track the field, format, and frequency to ensure that we are being provided with healthy data. Finally, we simplified the ways that data can be communicated to all stakeholders within O3. Within O3, we can edit each one of our layouts in order to make sure that we're displaying the proper fields to each one of our users. From here, we can add and remove fields so that only the relevant ones remain. Once we adjust those fields, we can then go through and add and remove tabs to make sure that the form is as simple as possible. With layout selection filters, we can have multiple layouts for each work package type. This allows us to differentiate between work packages of different types, such as fabrication installation work packages versus field installation work packages. We can also use this to separate between disciplines or separate between RFI types for some other examples. By defining our needs, tracking results, and simplifying communication, we are able to ensure a robust data management process. This allows us to make the AWP process simpler and more efficient, allowing for more successful AWP projects. Next, we decided to focus on change management. With O3's industry-leading solutions for AWP in both construction and engineering, we next sought to improve the collaboration between these two groups, specifically around managing change. This is an area where we've seen a lot of value already through constraint management, but by expanding our change management and release process, we allow engineers to manage potential changes while construction works in the most up-to-date confirmed information. Both parties are able to track updates as they're relevant to their part of the process. First, we can define the need for change. Engineering and construction teams can identify potential issues with vendor data and drawing markup, linked constraints, and RFI map tracking. These changes can then be managed by the engineering team and project team. The project team can manage the release of these changes when appropriate to the construction contractor. Robust notifications through an in-app data box ensure that the responsible construction stakeholders are fully aware of this change and its potential effects. In this way, we're able to manage the needs of both construction and engineering while further improving their collaboration to get even more value out of AWP. Tori, let's swap over to see what this looks like within the tool. Now, let's take a look at how O3 has improved change management to further support collaboration between engineering and construction. We first expanded our ability to define change within O3. Users can annotate drawings and vendor data to help them to understand and communicate the need for change. With changes identified, stakeholders can coordinate and communicate this change with enhanced RFI management. RFIs now have custom workflows, constraints, and approvals that make sure that the process is handled according to its unique needs, no matter what form it takes. Next, we added functionality to control the release of drawing and CWP changes as they occur in the system. As changes are made, users can track and release the change of each drawing and CWP. Finally, we added functionality to communicate these changes so that each stakeholder is properly in the loop on these changes as they are released. Users can keep track of those notifications via email and our in-app inbox. They can also set up their preferences to provide notifications on a frequency that fits their needs. Through providing new functionality to define, release, and notify of change, O3 has moved to provide even better collaboration between construction and engineering. Our next area of focus was in model and status visualization. The last area where we focused is in model and status visualization. Dashboards in the 3D model provide clear context for planning and reporting. To expand this value, we first brought 3D model support to additional stakeholders on testing, fabrication, and in the field. Second, we expanded automation for planning based on this data, utilizing model data to automate some planning, estimation, and crew requirements. Finally, we expanded visualization of progress. Progress curves provide granular tracking of progress across entities. In the 3D model, there are additional options for readiness and progress, and 4D playback allows for the same information to be viewed over time. By expanding the model to additional stakeholders, we provide a more clear and simple approach to work packaging and progress visualization. Next, let's take a look at what this looks like in the tool. Finally, we look to expand the value we provide in model and dashboard visualization for improved efficiency, oversight, and optimization of our AWP project. We first expanded access to the model to additional project stakeholders as a tool for planning and review. We've expanded the model formats that we accept, including IDF files for spooling. Test work packages now have their own purpose-built hierarchy as well that allows planners to quickly and easily create their new TWPs. Models are now also available through the fields through our on-field mobile app, allowing forepersons and other field stakeholders to access the model directly. Next, we expanded the automation available for work package creation. Additional model data fields and attributes are available for automation, and as we scope our work packages, we can use standard crew ratios to automatically estimate manpower as well. Finally, we've expanded our options to visualize progress. I'm proud to announce that O3 now has 4D visualization available for work package schedule and plan progress. Users can visualize their execution plan over time for IWPs, but also for CWAs, CWPs, EWPs, TWPs, and TOPs. We also expanded our status visualization options to better understand where components are in their lifecycle, and expanded our dashboard reporting to summarize this information through additional charts and new progress curves. Through this development this year, we both expanded our value and efficiency for existing planners and reporting users, but also expanded this planning and reporting efficiency to even more users on this project. In this way, we are continuing to deliver on our goal of making each AWP stakeholder more efficient and effective in their role. With these changes, we're able to continue to deliver against our goal of simplifying AWP implementation and improving collaboration across stakeholders. With data management, we're able to simplify the AWP process by adding automation and tracking, preventing duplicative entry. With expanded change management, we're able to help engineering and construction further coordinate and collaborate. And finally, with expanded model and visualization capabilities, we're able to expand who can leverage the benefits of AWP and provide additional oversight and optimization for our project. In this way, O3 provides a powerful tool for successful AWP projects across many of our stakeholders. To continue this conversation, I'll now hand over the presentation to Andrew Foy and our CEO, Josh Kervin, who will discuss the contractor's role in leveraging technology for AWP tools.
Thank you very much, Colin. Very exciting stuff. So as Colin mentioned, next up, we're going to be talking about the role that the contractor is going to play in AWP technology. So having seen what the technology is capable of, next we're going to look at this important subject of how it's used and which stakeholder company on a project should be in charge of the AWP software. Josh, welcome back.
Thanks, Andrew. Looking forward to the discussion.
So we're going to do this as a Q&A, so I'm going to fire a bunch of questions at Josh. First up, Josh, who typically provides the software for advanced work packaging and workplace planning on capital projects?
Well, historically, we've seen the owner or EPC take the lead with AWP technology, especially when it comes to workplace planning. And typically, this seems to be due to two main reasons. Firstly, the value proposition is usually most attractive to the owner, especially when they're taking on execution risk for the project. They're the ones with the most to lose from inefficient execution on site in terms of cost and schedule. The other main reason is timing. The construction contractor process is still heavily weighted towards the traditional 3 bids and a buy concept, where the contractor is only brought on to the project shortly before construction starts. With that in mind, it's difficult for the contractor to drive the A2P process and establish the necessary platform for A2P software success because they're simply not on the project early enough to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Second question, who is generally the purchaser of AWP software?
Well, O3's client base reflects this historical approach of the owners and EPCs. It's mostly split evenly between owners and EPCs, with a smaller but rapidly growing number of contractors directly purchasing the tool, and hence the reason for this Contractor Summit. O3's client is usually the one who's driving the AWP or workplace planning process on the project. If the owner is an involved owner who cares about results and wants to drive efficiency on the project, then it's generally the owner who's driving both the AWP program and the AWP technology. If the owner's not driving that, then oftentimes the EPC is driving that, particularly around workplace planning. And now we're seeing more and more contractors stepping up and demonstrating that they have AWP expertise and bringing their own technology to the table.
Okay. Next up, are owners mandating AWP and AWP software on their projects?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it depends on different scenarios. More and more owner companies are mandating AWP on their projects. We heard Shell talking about this being part of their core process, but most will typically shy away from mandating the AWP software when it comes to greenfield projects. They want to allow the contractor to show their experience with AWP and demonstrate how they'll manage the process. Is a little bit different when we're talking about small cap projects, portfolio management. There, oftentimes the owner is providing the software as well as mandating AWP. But some owners believe that forcing a particular piece of software on a contractor will cause issues with the contractor performance or lead to change management concerns. So then we see those owners often mandating the process and mandating that AWP be followed and mandating that certain data be provided. But if the contractor can produce a solution that will provide that, then oftentimes that'll be fine. If they're not, then the owner will often say, hey, use our tool as it works and meets those needs. But ultimately, owners prefer to work with contractors that have an established process and platform for executing AWP and workplace planning. This assessment can and should be included in the contractor assessment at the bid stage. So AWP mature owners are including this in their evaluation of contractors, and contractors that can show a history of performance will receive higher evaluations and win more work.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question. Are you seeing movement from contractors? Obviously we've talked about this being owner-led, but are more contractors now coming to the table?
Absolutely. Owner mandates for AWP on all projects are forcing contractors to up their game. And we've seen a flood of contractors reaching out to us saying that they're bidding on work that requires AWP and they need help. The number of contractors that have reached out to us over the last year saying, hey, I bid this package that requires AWP. Now I need to go figure out what that means. That's part of the reason why we're holding this summit today. And it's a great sign for the industry. It takes the owners showing this leadership in order to drive change. We saw a similar thing happen in safety. Once the owners got together and said, hey, we're taking this seriously, we're going to reward contractors who demonstrate safety and invest in that, then we saw that change happen in the industry. And we're seeing that now along productivity. Owners are saying, hey, this is important to us, productivity matters. We want you to demonstrate that the way you have a safety plan, you have a productivity plan, you have a plan for AWP. So, it is a slow process to see this change happen and make its way through the industry. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. But, many contractors, particularly those that are forward thinking, are realizing that AWP is a process that's here to stay, and they either get on the bandwagon or they get left behind.
Yeah, I think that status quo is starting to erode very quickly. So that being said, why have contractors not historically been the ones who've purchased the AWP software, for example?
I think a lot of contractors historically have taken the position that, hey, we're the small fish in the pond and the technology should be brought in by the EPC. More and more, however, we're seeing contractors wanting to demonstrate that they are investing in continuous improvement and bringing their own tools to projects. They want to distinguish themselves from other bidders. And so we're seeing more and more folks investing in that. And, this idea of everyone kind of bringing their own tools to the party, this was a real challenge before, right? A network of disparate systems, that used to be a real challenge, particularly for antiquated tools. But when you have tools like O3 that are modern and web-based and use modern APIs, it's much easier to integrate these multiple systems together, even including multiple integrations of multiple instances of O3. So we're seeing, because of the advancements in technology, modern solutions much easier to connect and share data. that it's less of a challenge to have contractors bringing their own systems, and they can integrate easily into the overall project technology landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the benefit to the contractor in purchasing the software? Why would the contractor be the one who comes to someone like O3 and says, we want AWP software?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons why the contractor would want to purchase the software directly. But firstly, you want to establish your own process and gain experience with AWP and workplace planning, and have the ability to prove that you have invested in this and distinguish yourselves from other bidders on projects. If you leave it until an owner is mandating AWP on a project that you want to win, then when you're bidding, you're scrambling to show history and experience and the ability to meet those requirements. If on the other hand, you can implement AWP and workplace planning on your own initiative and demonstrate that you have technology and investment in this continuous improvement, then when you come across an owner mandate or requirement on a bid package, you're already there with experience and technology and the ability to demonstrate reference projects. So I think, again, contractors are seeing, hey, this is a way that I can win work. It's a requirement, and if I get ahead of this, I can distinguish myself from other contractors. The second reason is more technology focused. Most contractors will operate multiple systems on a project. You have a materials management system, scheduling software, document management, completion software. And AWP, when it's implemented correctly, it's the hub in the wheel linking all these data together. Right? You heard a lot about the data side today from Duncan's presentation. But being able to connect all this data together is a critical part of AWP. And if the contractor waits for the owner, the EPC, to provide the software, they may find themselves contending with a different setup each time and having to reestablish system interfaces and having to play within this ecosystem that they control. But on the other hand, if the contractor establishes their own best practice for AWP and workplace planning and can show an owner that this is how we do it and these are the tools that we use, they have a greater chance to have a repeatable process that can be continuously improved over time and limit the impacts of change management, on their execution teams.
Yeah, so here's our way of doing it approach rather than being told. So we've talked a bit about the who and the how. What about the when? When should AWP or workplace planning software be introduced on a project?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to answer that, the first thing you have to do is distinguish between those two concepts, right? AWP is a project execution methodology that goes across the entire project lifecycle, right? It operates from the earliest, really from the beginning of the project, but even if you're not engaging in the beginning, at least incorporating through the earliest of engineering stages all the way through commissioning and completion. And workplace planning, on the other hand, is really focused on the construction execution phase. So the real answer is that true AWP software should be brought into the project at the same time as AWP itself, which is during concept select. So the very earliest parts of the project when you're setting up the project for success. But if the project's only using workplace planning on the project, then the software can be implemented shortly before construction starts. Now, that being said, we have talked about this before, that in order to take advantage of construction automation and the workplace planning during construction execution, you have to be able to connect all the different data sets together. So if you are integrating multiple systems together, you need to ensure that you have enough time to get that technology stood up and integrated before you need to use it. So when we say shortly before construction, you need to include enough time for that setup. But you also need to keep in mind that the value proposition changes significantly when you move from AWP to workplace planning only. There is value in workplace planning. There is value in just executing workplace planning and introducing better planning and constraint management around installation work packages. But to get the full value, to maximize the return on this process change, you really need to go to full AWP, and that's across the entire project lifecycle.
Yeah, I guess the advanced isn't advanced when you've already started pounding piles in the field. In terms of access, so we've talked about the software, and we've talked to contractor potentially purchasing it, but who should have access to it? Who needs to be able to be in the tool at any one time?
Well, because AWP touches really all aspects of the project across the entire project lifecycle, it's meant to be a truly collaborative process. It's meant to break down the silos across organizations and across disciplines and across stakeholders. So, the technology then sits in the middle of this vast array of all these project functions and ties them together in a work packaging framework. So the software really needs to follow the same logic of AWP being across all the stakeholders and not be a siloed approach. It should be collaborative and everyone should be participating in making AWP successful. So when it comes to access to the technology, engineering needs access. They can manage their scope, manage their vendors, report progress, respond to RFIs, execute constraints, develop engineering work packages. Construction can break the work down into these executable pieces, installation work packages. They can manage those packages through their life cycle, carry out the work, report the progress of those packages, manage all the constraints, and prepare it for turnover. And the owners can see exactly what's going on with the project and make informed decisions, the best interest of the project based on this real-time data. So everyone on the project team across all the organizations can play a role, including the scaffolders, the engineers, the vendors, the material handling team, contractors, engineers. Everyone should be involved. So you really shouldn't limit the access to your AWP software. It should be open. It should be collaborative. People should be working together. If you are looking at it from a perspective of, well, I don't know if I want to buy this license, benefit of that license for John, then you're already missing out, which is that AWP is about collaboration. It's about getting everyone in and working together. And that's one of the reasons why OP doesn't do a per seat licensing approach, because it's unlimited seats across all stakeholders, because it's supposed to be collaborative like AWP.
Fantastic. Okay, next question. How is AWP software used differently when purchased by an owner versus an EPC versus a contractor, for example?
Yeah, well, the owner's in a unique position to care about the entire project, from early planning through commissioning and startup. And so when the owner or EPC is purchasing the tool, it allows the project to maximize the use of AWP best practices and associated benefits across that entire project lifecycle. When the contractor holds the software, its use is typically limited to their scope. So either the owner needs to employ a more collaborative contracting method and get the contractors in sooner, or AWP benefits in that case are limited just to work phase planning. So if the contractor's coming in and you're just doing work phase planning, those benefits are limited just to work phase planning. The ideal scenario is you've got AWP and the technology across the entire project lifecycle.
Okay. So who do you think should hold the technology in order to bring the maximum value to the project?
Yeah, that depends on who's driving the AWP program. Realistically, any of the stakeholder groups, the owners, the EPC, the engineering contractor, construction contractor, can hold the technology, as long as they're doing so at the right time of the project and with the intent to share access to all the stakeholders. Where we have seen the most success and benefits from AWP is when the owner has implemented O3 at the front end of the project and provided unlimited access to the EPC contractors and construction contractors and engineers and vendors, and that really allows for that collaboration and maximum adoption of AWP best practices and the associated value that you get from following that better process.
Okay. What if the contractor, and I mean, I'm sure this is never the case, but what in the rare circumstance where the contractor doesn't want to share certain information with the owner or other stakeholders, for example?
Yeah, there will always be elements of the execution process that a contractor will want to keep to themselves. Ultimately, the contractor has to live up to the requirements of the contract, so they have to share the information that the owner or EPC requires in the contract itself. But for other data, the software can be set up in such a way to provide different levels of access for different user groups and stakeholders. So confidential information can be retained by its authors. So the contractor can set it up so that the owner has certain access but can't see certain things. And it also works the other way around. O3 supports working versions and released versions of data for cases when the EPC or the owner and EPC may have certain access to information. And then the contractor can be provided access only to released versions of data, for example. And this releases the old document-centric approach to transmitting documents for execution. And we heard Jerome talk about this a little bit in the video from Shell, which is, they've eliminated the need to have multiple systems, and the contractors can be working inside the same system as the owner and the EPC, and the EPC is releasing packages for the for the contractor then to go and build installation work packages off of. So there can be a release process within the tool that allows you to keep that information segregated as needed, so that you don't have contractors working on information that's not fully complete.
Absolutely. And last up, who is the most likely to push back on the introduction of AWP software on a project?
Well, change management is certainly the greatest challenge to the introduction of any new process or technology. You know, the detractors to change can come from, you know, really any part of the organization, are typically identifiable by their attitude rather than their role. So some people are just inherently unwilling to change their traditional way of working, or more resistant to change. You know, our standard approach is just to focus on the ways that AP can help people be more successful in their role. Most people, when they understand that it isn't going to radically alter their value to the company, and they can and understand how what they're doing and the changes that they're being asked to make, how those positively impact the project overall, you know, that gets people on board. I know one of the things right now, I'm chairing a CII working group specifically focused on AWP and engineering. And one of the challenges that we've seen within engineering is that oftentimes engineering feels, hey, I'm being asked to do this AWP thing. I'm being asked to change the way that I work in order to benefit the project. I don't think it benefits me. I'm making changes, but I'm begrudgingly willing to do this because I understand that it's going to benefit construction and benefit the project. Well, one of the things that our working group is focused on is identifying and documenting the benefits to engineering itself. How does engineering directly benefit from the implementation of AWP, so that you have engineering organizations that are raising their hand and proactively saying, I want AWP for me because I know that it benefits me, regardless of the downstream benefits to construction and startup and commissioning. So that's one area. And then there are certain roles that do change when you move from a legacy kind of scheduling driven approach to a planning and sequencing approach with the introduction of work-face planners. You know, schedulers are that's an example of a role that sometimes needs additional information and clarity around how their role is still important to the organization, and how this move towards work-face planning and sequencing of a work, as opposed to the antiquated kind of scheduling approach, will benefit the project overall. So there definitely are various roles that maybe require a little bit more updating and information to get on board. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the attitude of the individuals. There are certain individuals who are continuous learners and want to improve and want to do the best thing, and there are other people who are more resistant to change. So we always suggest that when you're looking for your pilot projects with AWP, you identify those project management teams that have a desire to be better and a desire to continuously improve.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh. We appreciate you answering our questions. And next up, we're going to move on to implementation tips and support for the contractor. So firstly, we're going to talk about contracts and how they play a role in AWP, particularly in terms of stakeholder collaboration. I'm going to run you through various contract topics, including timing, ownership, wording, and how the contractor should be assessing what the owner is looking for. Okay. So first up, we're going to start by looking at AWP and contracts. And we're going to start with two very, very simple questions. Does AWP language belong in bid documents and contracts? And have you ever actually seen AWP language in a bid document or a contract? These two questions are fundamental. It would be very interesting to see a show of hands at this point, but I don't think we've got that technology today. I sincerely hope that everyone would agree to the response of yes for the first question. As for the second, as we talked about a lot today, we're seeing it more and more on capital projects. More owners are insisting on it. They're writing the requirements directly into the contract. So what we're going to do today is look at this from the contractor's perspective and discuss some of the nuances of that contract language. So first thing we're going to look at is timing. When should AWP language first be brought up? And the answer, as with a lot of things with AWP, and the hint is in the A, the advanced part, is early. Any bid document should spell out the requirements for AWP so that the contractor, whether it's engineering or construction, has ample time to understand the owner's wishes and include them in the bid response. Consider it the same as you would a piping specification. Tell us what you want us to do. Tell us what your standard is, and we'll do it. Make it part of the contract, and it becomes enforceable. Any attempt to introduce AWP after award is always going to lead to arguments and change orders. If the first time the contractor hears AWP coming out of the owner's lips is during a kickoff meeting, it's going to be very, very hard to achieve. First reaction in any of those situations is always, oh, this is something you didn't tell us about, this is something new and terrible. Whereas if it's baked right into the bid documents, it's much, much easier to get that sort of buy-in and idea that the contractor is going to commit to this as part of their bid. The next thing we're going to talk about is ownership. So who decides what the AWP requirements are and who decides which contracts they apply to? So as with a number of things, and as we've already been mentioned today, this is going to depend on the contracting style being used for the project. But as with other things that we've talked about, it's going to nearly always be the owner. The owner's the ones that need to stipulate the conditions and standards for working on their project. AWP should be no different to that. You know, any contractor, any owner is going to say, we expect a total recordable incident rate of 0, hopefully, in order to work on this contract. We expect AWP to be used. We expect you to, perform this amount of non-destructive examination on the pieces of pipe. All of this should be specifications and details directly built into the conditions that the owner sets. Now, for projects that are done on an EPC basis, where the owner is delegating their responsibility to a third party, that EPC or EPCM might be the one to insist on AWP and stipulate the requirements, especially because they tend to have ownership of it throughout multiple phases of the project. As for the second question, which contracts it applies to, typically this is done as an assessment of value and intent. For example, if you have a large project and a significant portion of your work is being done in a mod yard on another part of the world, are you going to insist on AWP at that mod yard? So that might depend on the owner's maturity in terms of AWP and whether that mod yard is being assessed as a particular point of risk for the project. It might be a way for the project to defray some of the risk with that mod yard execution by saying we're going to do it, or it may not. Should the general mechanical contractor, as another example, enforce flow down conditions about AWP into the contract? So the owner has said, you must do AWP. Is that primary contractor going to push those down to some of its subs? What that contractor should usually be looking at there, again, is based on things like risk and criticality for the work that sub is performing. How much responsibility is that prime contractor or general contractor happy to take on for directing the work of the sub? And how much do you have to be hands off, just get on with it? So, for example, if you've got a subcontractor who's an integral part of the work and is going to be incredibly critical on whether or not you make the date or the cost or the timing or anything in the successful execution of the project, it's much more likely that you're going to want to include those flow down conditions. Whereas if you've got a contractor who's off working in an area all on their own, their timing, their schedule, their cost, their delivery isn't going to impact the rest of the project, that might play into that conversation as to whether you're going to need them to be part of that AWP methodology, especially if they're not used to doing it. So as with a lot of things, there is no hard and fast answer, especially to the second question. Some contractors, for example, will start with a narrow approach, so just pipe and steel. Then they start to expand it as their familiarity with the process improves. You can start looking at other disciplines. You can start looking at the roles of your subs. That's when you can start growing it to things like, do we include survey and NDE and some of the other disciplines that you wouldn't normally expect to be involved. So wording of AWP requirements in a contract. What should be written in the contract? And are we seeing that level of consistency in the language that's used for AWP? And this one in the speech bubble is always one of my favorites. I've heard this so many times. On this project, we are going to build AWPs. Well, of course, no, you're not. But as soon as you hear that, it gives you a very quick understanding of the level of AWP experience and expertise of the person that you're dealing with. And in terms of the wording itself, as with any other requirement, the intent of the contract language is to spell out the owner's desired standard for AWP. I always remember somebody telling me a contractor will perform to whatever level of requirement the owner sets, however high or low that is. You have to set the bar as the owner so that the contractor knows what they have to do to get over that bar. Now, none of this means it has to be included directly into the T's and C's, the terms and conditions section, the very legalese part of the contract. Like I said earlier, treat it like a piping spec. So the easiest and most consistent approach I've seen and I've used for AWP and contract is a very, very simple one, a short paragraph that says the CAI best practice of advanced work packaging will be used on this project. Contractor shall adhere to all requirements detailed in the attached owner AWP procedure, and then include the procedure. Put it in there as an addendum or as an attachment, much like you would do, as I said, like a piping spec. So all you're saying is, you know, there's probably 50 documents in a contract that says, here's all the things you have to do, here's all the things we're going to hold you to. AWP just becomes another one of those. Now, otherwise, and the risk you get into is you get a situation, and we're seeing this a lot, where some owners will say, do AWP, and that's it, no more detail. Some of them have a few paragraphs of requirements. Here's some of the stuff we want to see. And some of them will include 50 pages directly in the scope of work. None of those are inherently wrong, but you've got to be clear and consistent on what you want that standard to be, because otherwise the contractor might have a different understanding of what do AWP means to you and means to your project and means to your scope of work. So then, from the contractor's perspective, how does the contractor go about assessing what the owner is asking for? So let's assume that the owner has provided you with a bid document that clearly spells out the need for AWP on the project. What do you do? Firstly, and this is hopefully really the obvious one, read it thoroughly, exactly as you would do the rest of the contract. Make sure you understand what the owner is asking for. Don't be concerned if you have to go back for clarification on some points. Some of it might not be crystal clear. And it's also a very, very handy trick to determine if the owner truly knows what they want in terms of AWP, and if they actually truly understand what they're asking for, or if they're just saying, do AWP and hoping that the contractors figure it out for themselves. Next one, perform a gap analysis against your own AWP standards and procedures. So take the owner standard, take your standard, see what the differences are, figure out if there are any significant deal breakers. And when you respond to the bid, you can include a summary of that gap analysis so that the owner knows what the differences are between what they've asked for and what you're offering. And it's not necessarily the case that just because there's differences, there's a problem. They might be saying we want it done this way, and they might well be open and amenable to you coming back and saying, here's another way. Understand the difference between a guideline and a stipulation. And this actually speaks as much to the owners as it does to the contractor. But for example, you might see in a contract, IWPs should be between 500 and 1,000 hours. And it's subtle, but there's a very, very real difference between that and IWPs shall be or must be between 500 and 1,000 hours. So what you're looking for is, has the owner allowed latitude in the right places? Are they giving you a standard but not constraining you so much that you have to do it in this exact prescribed way? On that same note, push back where necessary, especially if there's stipulations that don't make sense. Owners and EPCs should be open to new ideas and improvements. If you have a situation where, for example, a contractor knows more about AWP than the owner or EPC that they're dealing with, the EPC or owner should be amenable to you coming back and saying, look, we tried it that way, the way that you're asking for several years ago. We tried a few projects like that. It didn't work well for us. So we developed a new way of doing it, and this is our updated way of doing it. That should be every bit as acceptable a conversation as discussions over path of construction and which way you're going to actually install the work. Be honest about your expertise and experience. Personal thing, I would always rather work with a willing amateur than a reluctant expert. So being new to AWP shouldn't exclude you from a bid. Frankly, all you need to do is show an intent to learn. If a contractor comes back and says, no, we're not AWP experts, but you know what? We've heard a lot about it. We know it's a great way of doing things, and we really want to get into it. Personally, having worked on the owner side, I'd take that, and I'd always rather deal with that than the person who comes back and says, yeah, we've tried it a bunch of times. We didn't really like it. We'll do it if you say we must, but we're just going to pay lip service to it. If owners limited themselves to just AWP expert contractors, the pool would be very, very small. And frankly, as Jay mentioned earlier, part of what we're trying to do is grow that pool. Lastly, don't reply with vapor. And I've seen this in the past. If you've got a very well-written procedure, but you don't use it, especially if you've just paid a consultant to do it for you, it's not going to help if you submit a great written procedure that you don't follow. And the trick to this is a 20-minute interview from the owner AWP champion with your AWP champion will quickly and very efficiently tell that person that you don't know what's in this procedure document or that you're not actually following it. I've seen plenty of very well written, very florid AWP procedures that frankly contractors aren't even using. So just some advice on how to deal with contracts and contract language. So that was the contract language. Now we're going to move on to talking about our last major topic, which is O3's AWP implementation toolkit. So AWP shouldn't be rocket science. The tools and techniques used to do this should not be closely guarded secrets. What we're going to do here and what we're trying to do with this whole process is share our plans to make them totally available. So by way of background, and I'm sure most of you will know this, AWP is a global best practice. It was made a CAI best practice in 2015. And since then, CAI has had various subcommittees and working groups that are trying to develop more materials and support for AWP implementation and usage. But what we're not seeing is a single complete walkthrough how to do AWP on a project, especially something that's based on natural sample project with proper consideration to technology. We see a lot of theory. So what we're trying to do with this implementation toolkit is help companies who are, especially the ones who are starting on their AWP journey, the ones who are picking it up and generally start with a blank piece of paper and several hundred pages of CII documentation. We want to help provide a systematic step-by-step approach for implementing AWP and to do this using a sample project. And we want to do this by staying away from the abstract, from the theory. We want to make this real. We want to use actual models, real world examples, things that you can actually relate to if you're a project professional, something that you will recognize rather than just boxes in a diagram that doesn't make sense until it's applied to a practical level. So why would you listen to us on something like this? Firstly, I'm not going to tell you that we have all the answers because nobody does. This is very much, AWP is a community of practice, but O3 is the first and only software solution dedicated to supporting AWP across all of the project phases. Frankly, we know what it takes to make AWP work. And on my end, I'll be the primary author of this, and I have years of real world experience creating and rolling out AWP programs from scratch. Quite honestly, if you are the person who's been tasked with making AWP work for your organization, I've sat in your chair, I've been in your shoes. We want to share this experience and we want to be able to combine it with the leading AWP software on the market. The interesting part is we're giving this away for free. We could be charging for this. There are organizations that do charge for some of this sort of thing, but we want to help the AWP community to grow. We want to help move the industry forward. You've heard today, we can't keep doing the status quo. We can't keep operating in this way. So we want to help tackle this with simplification. There's a lot of information out there about AWP. You will get flooded with information. For all that detail, sometimes it lacks a headline, a simple message, a place to start. You know, some tools, there's an AWP primer that CII has developed, which is kind of, for the American audience, like an AWP 101. Tries to distill AWP down to its basic components. That's a great start. But what we're going to try and provide here is a toolkit that shows you a step-by-step approach to implementing AWP on a project that doesn't scare people off. You don't need a PhD in astrophysics to do this. So we want to make something that's going to have realistic situations and something that's going to be appropriate to the detail of the audience that's going to be reviewing it. So some of the questions we kind of get asked a lot about this, doesn't CAI do that? CAI has a lot of information on their website, and there is a lot of material available. In fact, like I said, it can be overwhelming. There's a tsunami of data, and a lot of the information is theoretical. So O3 is heavily involved in CAI. We are very, very keen to keep growing that area. But what we're trying to do here is put a practical context on this and some real world examples. To answer the second question, this is not AWP training. O3 partners with the Concord Academy, who provides online self-paced training, which you can do that for AWP and workplace planning. That will help to give your teams a thorough understanding of what AWP is. This is intended to be a process-driven, step-by-step guide to actually implementing. What's going to be included? Like I said, we're going to try to do the whole life cycle. So everything from that early stage where you're setting up a business case, a return on investment, building an AWP procedure, path of construction, schedule, estimates, 3D model, contract language, EWP, CWP creation, everything you need to do all the way up to executing the work in the field. And in each case, we were going to give you real examples and templates for it. So you will get a document that explains what it is, you'll get a template for it, and then you'll get an actual copy that says, for this fake project that we're going to use, here's the path of construction that we wrote. And you can use that as a guide or a go-by for future. Who should use the material? This is targeted at, like I mentioned, that AWP champion, that person who in your organization has been tasked with developing AWP. And to answer the last question, yes, there are consultants that do this. That's definitely a way forward for some people. What we want to do here is give people that sort of first access to it and the basics to give you a starting point. If you then use a consultant to help develop and further refine your process, absolutely, there's definitely people out there who can help you with that. So the last part of this, where do I find it? It's on our website. We have started the release. There's, I think, the first 5 deliverables are already available on the website, and we're going to be releasing it gradually throughout 2022. So if you go onto our website, under the resources tab, just look for AWP implementation toolkit. There's also a little bit.ly link there at the bottom that can give you easy and quick access to get through. So that's some of what's already available to you today. That's some of the free information. Hopefully that gives you a good understanding and some grounding. And lastly, we are going to finish today with the presentations, and I'm going to hand over to Josh, who's going to finish up with the key takeaways from today's session.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. So some key takeaways from some of the things we heard from today. First and foremost, ADP is a project execution methodology, not a construction execution methodology. So it's important to realize that it's not about construction, it's about the entire project lifecycle, and AWP is collaborative and involves all the different stakeholders and breaks down those silos. The second thing is, O3 is a leading AWP solution to support that entire project lifecycle. We were built specifically to address the challenges of AWP across that entire project lifecycle, from the front-end planning all the way through startup and commissioning. Third, the leading owners are requiring AWP by building clear expectations into their contracts and bid packages. We heard Shell talking about it today. So this is a requirement. So if you're a contractor who isn't doing AWP, you will either be doing AWP soon or you won't be doing business, because this is just something that's being required by more and more projects. And AWP is this collaborative process that requires the contractors in order to be successful. You can't have successful AWP on a project if the contractors are not involved, if they're not involved with the technology and the process. The construction contractors and engineering contractors are just a core component of that overall project execution group that's required for AWP. And contractors who demonstrate the ability to support AWP with process and technology will win work over those who do not. We're seeing more and more requirements of this in contracts. It's being mandated by the leading owners and EPCs. And if you want to work on these projects, you have to demonstrate that you have a commitment to AWP and a commitment to technology and the ability and reference cases. This is becoming more and more important for winning work. ADP is not as hard as some people would like you to think, right? There's a number of people who have built businesses on making AWP seem scary and difficult, and saying, hey, in order to do AWP, you've got to work with me. You can't possibly do this on your own. I really just don't think that's the case. I think it's important for the industry, in order to see the changes that we want to see. We need this AWP maturity to grow within the overall industry. And there's ways to do that, and one of them is to check out the free resources. CII has a bunch, and O3 has a bunch of free resources that you can use to get started. So AWP is important. AWP is here to stay. AWP is required. It requires the contractors. If you're not doing it today, it's not as hard as you think it is, and we've got lots of resources that are available through us and through our work at CII and the work of others at CII that are available. So take advantage of those resources and get started. With that, I thank everyone for coming today, and I really appreciate the attendance, and thank our speakers for participating as well.
And in true AWP fashion, we are reaching our conclusion exactly on schedule. So as Josh mentioned, thank you all, everybody, for attending. Thank everybody who's, I know some of the time zones didn't work too well for some people, so appreciate people getting this outside of hours, and certainly this video will provide it to everybody who signed up. Any of the Q&A that we weren't able to get to today will be addressed and sent out to everybody going forward. So thank you all very much for giving us your time today. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one of our AWP xChange summits. Have a great rest of your day.